Hi, welcome to another episode of Sustainability Shorts. This is Nida Najib. Today, we're going to be talking about solar energy, particularly in the context of the rapid adoption of solar energy in Pakistan. Renewable energy is critical to mitigating the impacts of climate change. Just a bit of a fun fact, solar energy dates back to ancient fire lighting practices and has evolved considerably to modern photovoltaic technology, which was developed in the late 19th century. According to IEA, solar energy is the fastest growing renewable technology, with 80% of the 700 gigawatt renewable energy capacity being solar. In Pakistan, the rapid adoption of solar energy is due to unreliable electricity and a 155% increase in electricity tariffs over the past 3 years, thereby reducing reliance on conventional power. Now, just to give a bit of a context, the role of coal-powered plants in electricity generation has dropped to as low as 4%. However, this transition is import-led, thereby limiting access and affordability. Furthermore, the energy sector requires major infrastructure upgrades, as well as a financing mechanism is required to ensure wider accessibility. How can Pakistan localize solar manufacturing and supply? What role is solar energy playing towards the achievement of Pakistan's NDCs? I turn the spotlight to Arfa Ijaz, a researcher from the Sustainable Development Policy Institute, to shed more light on this.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. This was such I'd say, an effort on both sides, and the whole process in which we talked for like 3 months, and finally we came over to this point of recording this episode. My work is at the intersection of the energy transition, industrial decarbonization, climate policies such as NDCs, CBAM, and like policies like that. Basically, in terms of my contributions to the field of renewable energy, I've co-authored a report on greening special economic zones, in which we built a technical roadmap on on the like policy lessons from China, because they have really successful SEZ models there, and their SEZs are termed as GSEZs, green SEZs. And in that report, there was a special chapter which was related to how we can localize the solar supply chains in Pakistan and really translate this solar boom. That was something that I worked on. Along with that, I also worked on a research paper which we submitted to engineering proceedings. This research article was also on the same topic, how we can enable solar localization in Pakistan through lessons that we have like learned from China and their progress. So yeah, that's a little bit of the work that I've done related to solar in specifically.
All right. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. And I'm glad you set the stage of your research contributions, particularly with regard to the localization of the entire end-to-end solar supply chain, because this is going to sort of set the context for my next question. In 2024, Pakistan was one of the largest importers of solar panels, importing 22 gigawatts of panels. And in the 12 months preceding January 2025, Pakistan imported even more panels than the entire African continent. Now, interestingly, the fifth most populous country in the world is infamous for being one of the most rapidly growing solar markets in the Asian Pacific region. However, as stated previously, this growth is import driven and therefore leads to high costs and vulnerable supply chains. A potential solution does lie in indigenization. So my question to you, Arfa, is how can Pakistan progress towards the local manufacturing and supply of, solar, the end-to-end supply chain, in a way that helps to create jobs as well as boost the local economy?
Basically, I believe that our story of the solar boom it's been globalized at this point. We are literally part of a 25% solar club, which comprises of 17 countries, which are generating more than 25% of their electricity from solar. So we are part of this club at this point. And in order for us to keep going with that momentum, the one thing that appears in our minds at this point is solar localization. We need to build our skills and the capacity of the local people at the ground level. That is the first and foremost thing. Even people who haven't ever had electricity at their homes, they have access to solar now. And even remote areas, people have solar panels over small houses. They're making it all work. It's a very people centric movement. In this, we need to realize that people have a lot of role to play. When we start educating them, we provide them the technical background and education, they'll be able to turn that knowledge sort of into green jobs, where they can build these parts like microchips, say for example, or like the balance of system components that I just mentioned. But the thing is that we're still importing a lot of those like components from outside of Pakistan. So in order to do that, we need to build the capacity at the ground level, and then we move upstream, and then integrating them into our like industries, moving it towards the like large scale. We do have our special economic zones in Pakistan, and they're the best grounds for R&D, for technological improvements, for research, all of that. They're a whole area where we can do more research and find out what works for us, what sort of technologies can Pakistan benefit from, and we can like build them here locally in Pakistan. Apart from that, we need stable bankable policy signals. We need tax incentives. Now the whole issue is that the grid is no longer progressing. The grid is destabilizing. It needs modernization. It needs flexibility. We need to make it more compatible with the growth that we're facing right now, or else this is going to die down, and we don't really want that. We want renewables. We want this to like work out. So grid modernization is really important. And recently we've had the prosumer regulations introduced as well, which is not something that really very strongly is supporting the whole solar dynamic here in Pakistan, as the net metering has now been revised to net billing, which isn't really profitable. So that's something that's a downside to this. So we really need policy coherence. We need a stable investment climate where people want to invest in these in the localization of solar supply chains in Pakistan. We even had the 10-year solar localization policy introduced last year, and it's not really moving towards implementation or even towards its finalization. So we really need our policy environment to be a little more stable. We need an enabling environment for this to progress.
Yeah, so just to sum up what you just said, and I think it's fascinating how the solar rush in Pakistan has been driven by need rather than an awareness for climate action, you know? So, as you quite rightly put it, it's a people-driven movement. And the wonders of solar are profound because it's opening up access to electricity for homes which never even had conventional power. And we need to do, we all realize that our current IPP model, needs desperate refurbishment in order so that through renegotiation so that it works in the favor of the solar industry. And for that, as we discussed, government policy has a very big role to play in it, as do infrastructure upgrades. So Pakistan's renewable energy policy seeks to increase the share of solar energy in the national energy mix to 30% by 2030. Now, an overarching objective of this policy is climate change mitigation. One of the targets of Pakistan's NDCs is a 50% reduction in carbon emissions by 2035. Now, in order to achieve this target, renewable energy will undoubtedly play a critical role. Arfa, my next question to you is where are we now, and how can we ensure that a transition to a low carbon pathway is achieved?
So as of now, the Pakistan's installed electricity capacity is somewhere around 46 gigawatts, and of that figure, the renewables are at 12.5%. And along with that, if we take a look at the generation side, we see that combining hydel, nuclear, and renewables, 53.7% of our generated electricity is from these sources. So that's really heartening because we're like moving away from the thermal energy, the fossil fuels, and the polluting sources, we can say. This is something that's really nice, and it really creates hope that we are sort of like moving in the right direction, and we're moving away from these like fossil fuels and everything. We can really translate this into sustainable and long term climate action, we can say. Even first of all, we need to understand demand, how much we need, because if we just mindlessly even import solar panels or like build solar panels at home here in Pakistan, doing it without a strategy won't really work in the long term. We'll just have a lot of sources of renewable energy like solar and wind and stuff, but we won't really know what to do with it, and like how to take it forward, how to make this whole transition like work for us. So the first thing is that we need to strengthen our distribution systems in the way that we add more flexibility, again in the form of battery storage, in the form of demand response forecasting, and modern dispatch practices through which variable renewable energy can be integrated without any sort of penalties. And on top of that, we also need to incentivize commercial users. We cannot take a stick approach with this. We need to have a stick and a carrot approach from this transition. And along with that, we need to understand that this like energy transition and like decarbonization policies need to be paired with affordability, because if we don't have that, we're kind of like losing the social angle over here, and we're making these policies socially fragile, because our electricity prices for industries right now are sky high as compared to our regional countries and partners. These things are like really important for us to really be able to achieve our NDC targets. Like I said, again, we need all the sectors, all the stakeholders on board for this.
So basically, just to sum up what you just said, and I truly, something which has really struck to me is that because this is a people-centric movement, any transition that we hope to achieve has to be a fair transition. We cannot throw the people out. You quite rightly put it that way. And I think that's the core of our focus. And how this will come is to have a very strategic approach to how you are going to bring about this transition. It cannot be one day you want to have this policy, one day you withdraw that policy. You want to slap taxes, you want to withdraw those taxes. So it has to be very well thought out. And I think demand forecasting is a very excellent way to be able to sort of build that momentum going forward and to make those smart moves so that all the stakeholders are brought into the picture and their considerations are met. So I now move on to my final question. Your personal involvement in local climate groups. I remember both of us having a discussion in which you said that the involvement of Pakistan's youth in climate action and mitigation is crucial, yet their voice is not prioritized. So my question is a twofold one. How is Pakistan's youth committing to protecting the planet, number one? And what actions or what impact do you anticipate that such grassroots movements can have when it comes to solving the country's climate crisis?
So, if I were to talk about Pakistan's youth in general, it's been really heartening to see how much the climate movement has, spread over the last 5 years, 6 years or so. Because I remember taking it back to 2019 or 2020, this movement was still very like young, and it was like just a couple of people who were really involved in this, but now I'm realizing that a lot of the like youth is involved. Many people have started their own like startups, organizations, grassroots movements and stuff, and it's really creating an impact in the way that our generation is very well versed with the implications of climate change as of 2025. We are seeing cyclones, floods, heat waves, droughts, a lot of stuff. So we're able to communicate and translate this information to our older generations as well, our parents or our relatives or family members. So here the impact that we're really that they've really created is awareness, because I personally believe that awareness plays a big role in this in the climate movement. So if I were to talk about my involvement, I was a part of the local conference of youth back in 2023. That was the first LCOI we had here in Pakistan. So LCOIs are basically these like grassroots level initiatives. There's this whole hierarchy. There's like LCOIs, then there's a regional conference, then there's the conference of youth, and then there's the conference of parties, which we just had in Brazil even. So the thing is that these LCOIs, they played a crucial role in bringing the youth on the same page, educating them very well about climate science, implications of climate change, all of those things, and then translating it into such a document or such content which can then be showed at the higher conferences, such as conference of youth and conference of parties, where the youth they get to have a seat with where their perspectives are shared with the rest of the stakeholders, with the rest of the world even. So these movements, these organizations, they're playing a big role in really translating climate science, and like the knowledge that earlier a few people had, now a lot of our generation has this knowledge. And social media also plays a big role in this. Such movements are building the trust of policymakers as well, and in such a way that now the youth also are involved. I think there's this one program by Ministry of Planning which has youth. It's a very like youth centered program, and through that they're also including their perspectives in policy making and such matters. So yes, if the youth had not taken action, if we had not been interested in these matters, if we had not taken a chance or so, then probably we would be in the same place as we like were a couple of years back, where we weren't really included in these policy spaces. And the situation is still a bit complex to navigate, but I believe hope is something that can really like take you far. And if we just keep trying, and breaking the silos, moving as a community, we can really achieve tangible climate action.
Yeah, so I often believe when disaster strikes very close to home, that's when the urgency to act is felt strongest. And we need to recognize that climate change is a universal issue, affects all of us. And if we stand united and take it upon ourselves to ensure that not only do we spread awareness, but we actually try to tackle the problem. And as you just said, that we have a lot of action that is happening at the ground level. We have labs which are focused on, building climate solutions in order to solve the climate problems, but only when these voices are united and given that rightful seat on international platforms, because our country is one of the most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. So our voice matters. So only when we are united at home can our voice be amplified internationally. And the youth plays a vital role in that, because you are the generation of tomorrow. Thank you, Arfa, for joining us.
Thank you so
And
much.
thank you. And thank you, everyone, for joining us on this episode of Sustainability Shorts. We hope you enjoyed it. Tune in to our next episode, in which we are going to be discussing about ocean literacy and what a brave woman in the field of sustainability is doing to educate our youth on the importance of the oceans of Pakistan. Thank you.